Hello, my name is David Baker, and today I'm going to be talking to you about the steps necessary to place and finish concrete sidewalks. Here for this particular example, we're going to have a 5-foot sidewalk with a 2-foot utility strip in between the sidewalk and the curb. For this particular spec, for this concrete, it requires 1 inch of fall from the back edge of our concrete to the front edge and 1 inch of fall from the front edge of the concrete to the curb. So our first step is going to be establishing grade. What we do is put steel nail pins in the ground every 30 to 40 feet for the entire length of the sidewalk, and also they're going to be 2 feet from our curb. What that's going to do is help establish where to place our forms, and it's going to establish the 2-foot utility strip. Next up, we need to establish the grade on them. In order to do that, we level from the curb to our pin and put a mark. After we have that mark, we can measure up 1 inch from that mark, and that's going to be our 1 inch of fall. After we have our fall on all of our pins, we can tie a string line that goes from pin to pin, and it'll give us a guideline to place our forms. After we have our forms set, this is a method to double check them. We use a 1 inch block and place it on the curb and level over to our front form. If it reads level using that 1 inch block, then you know that the form is correct and on the right grade. Here you can see us placing all of the front forms. You can see here how the form sits flush with the string line, which is already on grade and has our 2-foot for our utility strip. And the back form here uses a slightly different method. We have a tool here that's called a jig, and what the jig does is establishes our 5-foot between our forms, and it also uses a 1 inch block to give us our grade. So in one step, we can set our form and have it be on the correct grade. Once the forms are all complete, it's time to pour concrete. And there are 4 steps to placing concrete, and they're pouring, spreading, screeding, and bull floating. In this picture, you can see the first 3 steps. The first step being pouring, which is pouring it directly out of the truck in between the forms. The second step is spreading, which is done with a concrete rake, which you can see right here. And what that does is pushes concrete into the low areas, and it pulls concrete away from the higher areas to make it easier to screed. Screeding is done with a 2x4. And all you have to do with it is drag it on the top of the forms. There's a guy on each side to make it easier, but what it does is levels the concrete. It pulls all the high areas down, and if you see a low area, you can push more in there with the rake, and it creates a nice level surface. After screeding, this is what the concrete will look like. There's still rough areas and stuff, but everything's flat. This is a bull float here, which is our next step. Immediately after it's screeded, you need to run the bull float back and forth across it. And a typical bull float is 3 to 4 feet in width, and they're all made of magnesium. Magnesium will push all of the stones down and bring more cement to the top to give us a nicer surface to work with. Here's what the concrete will look like after it is all placed and bull floated, and it's time to start finishing. The concrete still has a rough texture on top, but all the holes are closed in, and it's a nice flat surface to work off of. Like pouring and placing concrete, finishing concrete also has 4 steps. They're edging, joining, slicking, and brooming. Here pictured is the first step, which is edging. Edging gives it a decorative edge, and it also creates a stronger edge. It makes that edge resist against chipping and cracking. Our next step after everything is edged is joining it and slicking it. This is a joiner. It's also made of magnesium like the bull float, and what it does is creates a controlled crack. As concrete cures and dries, it shrinks, so it's always going to crack. But what this allows is it allows the concrete to crack inside of that joint, so whenever people are walking over it, they can't see the crack. Immediately following the joiner, we use a slick trowel to erase the joiner lines and to further smoothen out the concrete. A slick trowel is about the same size of the bull float, and it looks like a bull float, but it's made of steel instead of magnesium. The steel is going to bring more moisture to the top, and it's going to give it a smoother finish, as you can see here. This is the bull float finish, which is still rough, and you can compare those two to see how much slicker that one is. After all of it is slicked off and jointed and edged, it's time to create a broom finish on top. This is a finishing broom, and what it does is creates small lines in the surface of the concrete to give it a non-slip texture. Here you can see what the concrete looks like whenever it's broomed, and over here you can see it has not been broomed yet and it's still slick and shiny. After the concrete's broomed, it's pretty much complete, so you can then remove your forms, and this is a finished product then. And here again you can see the finished product. Everything's broomed, jointed, slicked, and all of the forms are removed. Using this same method, there are multiple different sidewalks that you can pour. For example, we could have a 6-foot sidewalk with a 3-foot utility strip, or we could have a 10-foot sidewalk with no utility strip. But it all uses the same method to establish the grade and to place and finish the concrete. Here's an example of something that looks a lot different but used the same method. In this particular case, we didn't have a curb to go off of, so grade hubs were placed all around, and that gave us the grade that our sidewalk needed to be, and also where at it needed to be. But this looks a lot different, but all of the same exact methods were used. And this is the most common method used to place and finish concrete. If you have any questions, feel free to comment.